So I'm Adam Beck. I'm here in Lugano with Giacomo Zucco, and we're debating sats versus bits and sats.
So I think there are three orthogonal arguments for that. The first one is that anyway, the classical unit that we were using, Bitcoin, is too big. It creates a unit bias, so we have to switch to something else. And I think that
Right.
everybody agrees with that. And my first argument would be that while the Bitcoin unit had a lot of traction at the beginning, it's losing the traction because of the problem of being too big. And now the next big thing, as far as standards are concerned, the thing is getting more traction so far is sets. And I will make an argument that we will have to go with the thing with more network effect, regardless of the content, because, like, for example, I dislike BIP 39. I think it could be made better, but it's so standard that now we have to go along with it for a simple question of standardness in a way. So that's a completely orthogonal argument. If bits was more standard right now, I will flip immediately with this first argument. The second would be that it's about the unit itself. So the Satoshi, the last digit of the amounts in Bitcoin has a relevance in consensus rules. So it's relevant, for example, for the enforceability of Lightning channels. You can enforce just down to the Satoshi, but not below. It's relevant for the halving process, like the halving process will stop when you hit the divisibility problem with Satoshis. So it's consensus relevant, while any other small multiple of Satoshis, they lose this quality to be also insightful in a way for some consensus property. Of course, noobs that we are going to onboard, they will not care immediately for these subtleties, but if we can already onboard them in a new standard that will teach them something about halving, about enforceability on chain, I think it's an added value, so we don't have to undo it later when we want to explain then more stuff. And the third argument has nothing to do with the chosen sub-multiple or the chosen unit, but mostly about the name. I think that among several names that you can use, bit is a name that has already a very specific and relevant meaning in computer science. Specifically, it's a unit of information. You can use it to define the entropy of your seed. So you can say, my seed is 264 bits, and it's storing 500 sats. And it's better for me that it's storing 5 bits because it's redundant with the entropy information. Of course, practically speaking, nobody is going to enter this confusion very soon, but still it's potentially relevant. And the other is how much are you paying a transaction? I'm paying 5 bits for a single virtual byte, which means 5 bits for 8 virtual bits, which basically makes the transaction fees dimensionless numbers. So I think that it's preferable to use the last unit instead of the multiple, and it's preferable to use another name as compared to bit. And since satoshis are the best unit it's the best next attempt at the standard fulfilling these two criticisms, I think it's better to go with that. Most of the criticism that I heard comes down to one, which is it's cool to have 1 unit and 2 decimals in dollars, British pounds, and euros, which are the most considered as the most stable and mainstream currencies. But I think that doesn't mean much because we can just go to 1 sat and decimals. When we don't know where we will get to bit dollar parity, we may just as well wait to go to set dollar parity. And I don't think there is a convincing argument why we'll not get that far.
Okay. Well, I think the sats has got some traction because of the alliteration. Stacking sats, stats the standard, right? So it's kind of a meme and people like it. But that's the current users. So we've got to think about the next billion users. And for them, I think that bits and bit cents are more intuitive. That, a Bitcoin might be, you could break it into smaller parts or bits, right? And a Bitcoin would contain bits because it's a digital money. And I think also people are not so worried about sort of redundancy in language. So they actually seem to enjoy ambiguity. And you can see that also in other uses of the word bit in money. So it has some slang uses in money, and it's an older use is also for a piece of 8. So it's a kind of gold coin that is perforated, so you can break it into 8 pieces, and that is a bit. So it's a unit of gold weight, I guess, ultimately. And so there's that use, and I think the unit bias point is well received in the sense that it's a problem even for programmers and technical people that they hear the price of Bitcoin and they think, oh, that's too expensive, I can't afford to buy one. And then you explain, well, you can buy a bit of Bitcoin, like a small part or a fraction of Bitcoin. And so I think the unit bias in conversion between 100 million sats and a Bitcoin is difficult. So I think particularly due to ISO standards and common units in many parts of the world, that you have people are practiced at knowing that there's 1,000 meters in a kilometer or 1,000 grams in a kilogram and 1,000,000 grams in a ton and this kind of thing, right? So it's easier for them to recognize and adjust for 3 decimal places before or after the point, but 8 decimal places after the point, it's relatively easy, even if you know the conversion, to accidentally add or remove a 0, which could be expensive or cause something to fail. And I think also, it's a shorter term, more short-term achievable parity target to reach bit dollar parity. And people like watching metrics get closer, right? If you put a further in the future metric, then they get frustrated. Are we there yet? No, we're still 100 times away from it. And so, I think it doesn't matter if a bit ends up being worth more than $1 in 5 years or something, because that's common for stronger currencies, right? That they get a stronger and stronger valuation relative to other currencies over time, and it's almost positive, right? That it shows that Bitcoin is winning. And I think that, as you said, for people who are familiar with currencies that have a cent division, that it feels more familiar and unusual to them to have a single currency, right? So, in US dollars, you don't describe amounts in cents, like 1,023 cents or something. You say $10.23, and the same for euros and British pounds and Swiss francs and so on. So you have that kind of familiarity for a lot of people. And so, I think I had another point as well, which I've forgotten for the moment. But so it's just like a familiarity, more a closer parity target, and the ambiguity is less of a concern potentially. And there's some interest in, people consider Bitcoin to be digital gold, right? So if it has a bit, means something to people who are familiar with gold as well. So there's some kind of overhang there. Yeah.
Well,
and bits came before sats. Bitcoin QT has bits. Unfortunately, there are some other divisions which are too ISO, like millibits and microbits. Those are more scientific terms, so not easy for people to deal with.
And also, a millibit is not a thousandth part of the proposed bit. A millibit is 1,000 parts of Bitcoin. Basically, people were calling thousands of Bitcoin millibit.
Right. And so it's more like a kilobit, which is like super confusing.
Yeah, it will become millibit will become kilobit. Yes.
Yeah.
So I think that the objection that I receive the most is actually that the transition between the old unit that we all agree is too big for practical users, which is Bitcoin, and Sats is complicated by these 8 decimals instead of a multiple of 3. So this is a good objection. Bits will just mean consider a millionth, while Sats will be just consider an 100 millionth, which is another complexity.
Another interesting use for bit is that historically in the Bitcoin code, there's some labels that say cents or bit cents. And so it might be easier for newcomers to hear that Bitcoin is divided into 1,000,000 bits and each bit is divided into 100 bit cents. that feels more convenient. And so, because if you watch the videos of people like talking to people who are not familiar with Bitcoin on the street and asking them questions, what's a Bitcoin worth? Can you buy part of a Bitcoin? If you say satoshis, they ask, what's that, right? Whereas if you say BitCents, they would probably get the idea more intuitively.
Well, I don't have empirical data to really confirm or deny that with people, because I always tried either with Bitcoin decimals or Satoshi, and then I switch directly. So maybe you're right, maybe you're not. I think that the objection that transition with 8 decimal is harder is a good objection. There is some mitigation to this objection, like the sat comma standard. So you can use two visual points. One is a dot and one is a comma, and you can basically break that into something like what you say. So basically you have the 2 decimals after the original Bitcoin, and then you go with the comma just to separate the powers of the 3 powers of 10, basically, the powers of 10 to the 3. Yes, that could be a problem. Even if at this point, I'm not even sure we are in transition still, because it's literally unusable to think about in whole Bitcoins for most practical users outside buying a house. So that's a good objection. The objection about familiarity with cents, I think that's misguided, because most of the adoption, the next billion users that we will onboard probably will come from what we call the third world, and not really from the privileged fiat world. I mean, arguably, unless we suffer some kind of huge collapse of the US dollar, which is possible, but maybe not super incumbent as a situation. And for most of the people outside the privileged part of the Canadian dollar, US dollar, euro, the concept of cents don't exist literally.
Well, they probably had cents, but they inflated it away.
Exactly,
so
but they went out of any kind of memory. Like from Italy, now we have euro, but back then we had lira, and the smaller unit was 100 liras, and that's completely normal. In Turkey would be the same. Most of Africa would be the same. In most of South America would be the same with pesos or bolivars. So most of the target users are used to talking about huge multiples of the fundamental unit and not in cents. So we are basically helping the familiarity among a class of users that probably need it less. So there may be that argument. I will actually try to debunk your argument that people do not care for redundancy, basically exposing the real reason for your opposition to sets, because Blockstream has the Blockstream satellite, which is set. So you just want, this is a Blockstream conspiracy to avoid redundancy with set as the Blockstream satellite.
No. Actually, the Bitcoin QT wallet, when you put it into bits display, has, I think it's either an apostrophe or a space grouping. So even though you are looking at fractions of a Bitcoin, if you put 21 Bitcoin, it would have 21, a space, 3 zeros, a space, and 3 zeros, and then a point, and then 0, 0. So it has tried to address the grouping, so to make it easy to recognize groupings of 3 at least.
I can make a final pledge. I think that Sats will win, but if Bits will win, I will not Roger Ver, and I will just accept the global consensus, even if this is not a consensus matter, so we could just fork in different paths, but I will just abide to the standard if I lose, but I will fight until the end.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the other thing is that it's not bits or sats, but it's sats or bits and sats, right? Because when you talk about bits, you're going to want, to cover small values. And even if, 1 bit is $1, people still need the precision, right? Because the prices of items are not rounded. It will be, 99 bit cents or 1 bit and 99 sats or something like that. So you still want the precision. And so, I think that you can sort of have both. And if it's a small amount, you could say, well, it's 120 sats, right? And if it's a larger amount, maybe you talk more about the bits. So there's sort of, you can have both, basically. And then it becomes easy to convert between bits and sats, because just a factor of 100, which people are very familiar with. And then, once you can convert from, I think it's easier to convert between Bitcoin and sats if you go via bits, because you've got a unit of 100 and then units of 1 million, which are easy to work with.
This gave me another argument, like in gram, which well, actually, that's messed up because in physics, the fundamental unit of mass is kilogram and not gram,
Right, that's
which
a
is a little
mistake.
bit ugly. So
Yeah.
it's not just Bitcoin screwing up the units, also physics. But if we think about grams, the relevant multiples are included hectograms. Like in Italy, when you buy, when you used to buy, even now, if you buy it ham, they will ask you quanti etti, how many hectograms basically, and they just say etti, etto. So maybe there's some analogous also in other languages. So basically, if you start with sats, you can still have a decimal system to go to 100 sats. So it still makes sense to have that part as relevant, and then you can go up to like mega sets and giga sets and peta sets and stuff like that. Of course, I would still not call one hectoset bit because I'm so annoyed by the redundancy with the information unit, but I would be happy to call it one back. So one back and few
No,
sets. I
please
mean,
do. Yeah. The Ethereum guys had they had a 256-bit precision number or something, and they had lots of different units, including
the die, right? The way.
And there was a back, but when they found out that I'm not enthusiastic about altcoins, they deleted it. So I'm very happy about that.
So there was a cancelled back proposal.
Yes.
Okay, we can take back.
No, like, please not.
So if you guys enjoyed this debate, and in general, if you enjoy violence and conflict and drama, as you could find in this video, you can see the second part of this debate, and you can see if either of us will change their mind. Basically, if you want violence, you have three options. Either you watch MMA, or you watch Elon Musk fighting Zuckerberg in the Colosseum, or you watch me and Adam discussing this again, this time in the Plan B Forum, here in Lugano on the 20th and 21st of October. We will both be here ready for violence.